Hello, welcome to Authors on iTours, and today we are interviewing Lilianne Milgrom, the author of L'Origine, The Secret Life of the World's Most Erotic Masterpiece. Paris-born Lilianne Milgrom is an internationally acclaimed artist and award-winning author residing in Washington, D.C. In 2011, she became the first authorized copyist of Gustave Courbet's controversial painting, L'Origine du Monde, which hangs in the Orsay Museum in Paris. Milgrom spent a decade researching and writing L'Origine, the secret life of the world's most erotic masterpiece. Her debut novel has been awarded 6 literary awards, including the Publishers Weekly 2021 US Selfies Book Award for Best Adult Fiction. Today, we are interviewing Lilianne Milgrom about her new book, which is an award-winning novel, which is L'Origine. And please forgive my hillbilly accent. I know I am messing that up. And I will ask Lilianne to correct us, to actually teach us how to pronounce the name of her novel, which is an award-winning novel, historical fiction about a French masterpiece artist. So Lilianne, why don't you give us an instruction on how to pronounce the name of your novel and tell us a little bit about it.
Thanks so much for having me on today. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Oh.
I'm laughing because L'Origine, which is French for origin and comes from the name of the painting that the book is about. I really have to say that I struggled with whether to include that French word in the title because it's not that easy to pronounce, but it's spelled so closely to the English origin that I felt that people seeing the word l'origine, even if they couldn't pronounce it properly, they would see the word origin and they would know it had something to do with origin. But I struggled with it. And in the end, I said, you know, it's a French painting by a French artist, and it takes place mainly in Paris. And so that also gives the flavor. And then I added the subtext, L'Origine, the secret life of the world's most erotic masterpiece. And there you have it. Then you really understand what the book's about.
Do you find that it discourages some people, some readers?
Unfortunately, the word erotic might discourage people, but the fact is that it is an erotic painting. It is quite, a scandalous and very realistic painting. But I figured that it would appeal to, there's no point hiding what you have inside. So I got some very good advice from another author when I started writing. And she said, I was sort of going to build up. And she goes, no, people just read the back anyway, and they know what it's about. So start at the most exciting part and let your readers know right up front what this is about. So I carried that advice over onto the cover and everything. Unfortunately, right at hand, I have the old cover.
Oh, okay. You see, now I never saw that one. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's been re-released by another publisher.
Well, we now have the new cover with the re-release. And, and it's just, I see more than that on my husband every day. At the beach too. Yeah.
I know, it's just a pair of legs, really. So that's totally unoffensive. I think it's what you bring to it. I mean, those words might have discouraged some people. The French, maybe they're going, oh, or perhaps the word erotic. But like I said,
it's not an erotica. It's historical fiction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to bring home the point that it can and has crossed over to all sorts of people is that it's won 6 literary awards. So the judges have judged it for its content and not because it might be scandalous or might offend people, which it really isn't an offensive book. It's about a work of art. So let me explain a little bit about the book and its genesis.
Tell us about the book and what inspired you to write about this.
Right. So about 10 years ago, I was in Paris on an artist residency. My primary profession is an artist. I'm a painter. I was in Paris, and I wasn't quite sure how I was going to spend this precious 6 weeks I had in Paris on an artist residency. And so the first day I went to the Orsay Museum, one of the most famous museums in the world, because I always get inspiration from looking at other art. And I came across Gustave Courbet's painting entitled L'Origine du Monde, The Origin of the World. If you pair that title, The Origin of the World, with an image of a beautifully painted, cropped close-up view of a woman's torso and genitals, that's basically what it is. And it just stopped me in my tracks. You know, when you see that in this famous museum, it was just like, whoa, you know, what is that? And what is it doing here? What is this painting? I knew about Gustave Courbet, but I wasn't that versed in this particular painting. I just couldn't get it out of my mind. It was just so brazen, so unapologetic. And also it broke taboos that were in place for centuries. You know, think about what you normally see, you know, a hand covering that area, or a fig leaf, or a piece of fabric.
Yeah.
So here's this totally realistic view of a woman's area there, a woman's anatomy, that you don't ever really see. So I started walking around the museum, and on my way out, I don't know what made me do it, but I just decided I had to spend the 6 weeks with this painting. And in my book, I described the very sort of amusing adventures I had getting authorization to become the painting's first copyist at the museum.
Oh, okay. So you actually painted it too?
Yes, I spent 6 weeks at the museum painting on site, copying this painting and speaking to people from all over the world who had come to see this painting. So obviously I was totally influenced by this painting. And when I got home, I started digging further into its history. And that's when I said to myself, this painting's history has to be told in a novel. It is just so exciting. It covers 150 years. And of course, it was so scandalous that it was kept hidden for 150 years. The public has only seen it since the late 1990s.
How is it that, how did it survive 150 years? You'd think that if it was a scandalous painting, like, you know, like if I did a picture that nobody, you know, then it would eventually get destroyed. How did it keep from getting destroyed?
Well, that is the secret, and you'd have to read the book, but I will give you some pointers. So when you think about it, it was never meant for the public. It was actually a private commission from an Ottoman diplomat who collected erotica. And he had some works by the most famous artists in the world at the time. So it went from hand to hand, from collector to collector, depending on what happened to those collectors in their lives. It also survived 2 world wars, revolutions, Nazi capture. I mean, it just goes on, and you can't make this stuff up. The painting's history is really remarkable, really remarkable. And then it ended up in the Orsay Museum in the 1990s. So it's only quite recently that it's been seen by the public, and it causes a scandal no matter who sees it. And there's still tons of debate about it. And many, many contemporary artists are influenced by it and have created work around this work, because it was groundbreaking. And the artist himself is a real character, a real black sheep. And I just adored him. I love characters like that. And he looked like Johnny Depp, which doesn't hurt.
Now, how were you able to do all this? So you copied the painting, but how were you able to get into, how did you do your research? Because it sounds like a lot of the, especially most of this was before the internet was, you know, so you couldn't just do a research. I imagine you had to do a lot.
Oh, okay. I see your point. Okay. So the way I did my research, fortunately, I'm French born, and so I speak French and read French, because most of the books written by historians and academics about L'Origine du Monde and about Gustave Courbet, the painter, are in French. But they are mostly biographies and academic treatises and things like that. So I mean, it took me 10 years of research and writing.
Oh,
I
wow.
really did it proud, because history is one of my loves, and so it was just enjoyable for me. But I kept digging further and further and finding all these esoteric sort of details about what happened to it, and primary sources of people who saw it along the way when it was hidden behind other paintings, etc., etc. So I built up, you know, an enormous amount of information, and then I cherry picked to make it the most exciting novel you could imagine.
Mhm. And how did you get the cover design? How did you decide on that cover? Because now they changed the cover for the re-release. They
Yes,
changed that.
yes.
Yeah.
So this first one, I designed it because, you know, I am an artist and I designed it. This is part of a painting by Gustave Courbet.
Okay, but it's not the painting.
It's not the painting, because the painting would not be allowed on the front cover, because like I said, you wouldn't, this painting does not, the painting we're describing is solely a woman's private anatomy.
Okay, so the legs aren't that either.
No legs,
the legs
no
are the second
arms,
part. Okay, the
no
second
legs,
cover.
no arms, no head, just that. Okay.
Just that,
So,
yeah.
so you could not have that on the front of a book. It would be very problematic.
Okay.
So I had that. And then when it was re-released by Girl Friday Books, they convinced me, and I do love this, they convinced me to do this cover, because obviously if you're looking this way, you know, that would be the painting, right?
Yeah.
But also, interestingly, this is the bottom part of the same painting that I had originally chosen.
Oh, okay.
So it's still a Gustave Courbet painting, so it just fits beautifully.
Now, was he commissioned by the same person for this painting that you have on the cover?
No,
he just did that differently because he was a character.
Well, no, he was already in trouble with the art world. He was just a rule breaker, and he did not want to listen to what anyone said. And he just refused to paint what artists were supposed to paint in those days, which was scenes of goddesses and gods, mythology, religious themes, wars, things like that. It was very prescribed. You know, it's not like today where you can paint whatever you want. No, it wasn't like that at all. And he just was chafing at the bit to overturn all these restrictions. So at the time that he was commissioned for this painting,
and what year was that? What year was
1866.
1866. So it was like right after Civil War here in the United States.
Yes. So it was, you know, it was quite a conservative time at the time. But even though Paris was very liberated, comparing to a lot of other places, this sort of subject was still very much taboo. So you had this exotic Ottoman diplomat living in Paris at the time, and he met Courbet. And he went to his studio and he saw a painting there of two women, nude women, and that he loved. And he said, I want that painting. And Courbet said, well, I'm sorry, that's already been sold. So the Ottoman diplomat, they negotiated, and he said, okay, well, I want another one similar to that. So they negotiated the price, and the Ottoman diplomat didn't like the price. It was too high. So Courbet said, well, I'm going to throw in another little one, and it'll be a surprise. And that's what this painting, L'Origine du Monde, was.
So he was a rascal.
Oh, absolutely. And he was hysterical. And I'm going to show you something. The reason I fell in love with him is, oh, I can't even lift it up, is this 700-page compendium of his private correspondence.
Oh.
And you just see all this. I just was laughing out loud when I read his letters. He didn't realize how funny he was, because he was always like self-pitying and complaining and criticizing people and calling people old fuddy-duddies. And he just was a character. I loved him.
Now, what made him so famous? Now, you say that he's a character, but is it just because his artwork was so fabulous? Or was he born into high society? Was he a member of high society, or how did he?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. He actually came from the provinces, and at the time in the 1860s and around that time, like 10 years before and after, Paris was a place where artists flocked to, because you had the Louvre, which had galleries and galleries and galleries of paintings and artwork and sculptures from all over the world, which used to be in the private domain of the kings and queens. But after the French Revolution, the Louvre was opened up to the public. And so artists came flocking because they wanted to learn. So he was from the provinces. He came to Paris. He left school. He told his parents, this isn't for me. He never went to class. He didn't listen to what anyone told him. He ran away from school.
Thinking of Johnny Depp, he was probably drinking Jack Daniels.
Oh, yeah.
Smoking pot, hanging out.
Right. He came to Paris and he was wearing sort of his wooden clogs, and he was kind of unkempt, and, you know, people would look at him. Anyway, the thing to do was to go to the Academy of Art if you came to Paris. His uncle had set him up to go there. He said, no, I'm not going to learn from those old fuddy-duddies. They don't know what they're talking about. I'm going to become famous in 5 years. I'm going to take Paris by storm. He actually said this in his letters, and he did. So he went to the Louvre and other museums and spent the days copying the masters, which was a really good way to learn at the time, and something that I did myself, you know, with his painting. So it sort of crosses over. But he just decided to take themes. What made him sort of the talk of the town at the time was he painted these enormous, enormous canvases, 20 feet by 10 feet, of peasants at a burial and things like that, people, everyday people from his hometown. And that, believe it or not, caused such a scandal because people had never done that before. They didn't want to see ugly people. They didn't want to see real people. The people in Paris looked down on these sorts of people. So the fact that he painted them in such a huge format that you would normally paint kings and queens in, he got a lot of flack for that, and he made a name for himself. So,
but he made a name for himself for not a good reason.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. He loved to rub people the wrong way. He loved to do that. So he did get in trouble in the end. That's a long story, but he was eventually had to exile and leave France in a hurry. He was, and it's very exciting. But, you know, even from the little I've told you, I'm sure you're not surprised.
So he left France. Was he ever allowed to go back?
No, he died in Switzerland.
Oh, okay. Did he die penniless, or was he a master? Is he one of those who he became famous after he died?
No, he was quite wealthy when he was doing well, right? He had quite a lot of commissions.
Yeah.
But then when this incident happened, the government of France decided to hold him responsible for an incident during a commune uprising. And they they said he was solely responsible, and he had to pay the government something like $3 or $30 million comparably. He didn't have the money. He became bankrupt, and he had to leave France very quickly. So he died penniless, and he died very ill. It was really a sad ending. But the painting story goes on. You know, that's what was so remarkable. It didn't just die with him. So,
well, how did the person who contracted for the painting feel whenever he got this little painting of?
He was delighted.
He was delighted.
Absolutely, it was like the gem of his entire collection, and I'm not going to give away too much, but he lost all his money. He lost all his money and had to sell his whole collection. And then we go on and on to other collectors.
To the other stories for this whole painting.
Yeah.
So, now, when did it end up in Paris? When you saw it? You said that was like the 90s.
1990s. It was acquired by the Orsay Museum, and then I was there in 2011, and that's when I had my artist residency. So it was still a fairly new painting for the public.
Mm-hmm. Oh, now where did you find, because you just showed me that book that has 700 pages of letters written by the artist. Now, where did you find that? Did you find that in the library, or how hard was it?
No, I mean, I'd say there's, really thousands and thousands and thousands of entries on Google about Gustave Courbet and L'Origine. So there were two books. There was one little book here. There's one historian in France that is sort of the, how should I say, the expert on this particular painting. Well, I don't know. I shouldn't show that. I'm sorry about that. He has it on his thing. This is a French book.
He has the painting on his cover.
He has the painting on his cover, but he is the expert. But he writes it as a biography, and so there are lots of sources and books written about it. So it wasn't hard to get hold of the books if you speak French. But like I said, it took so long to research and to write because
we're talking 150 years.
150 years. I made a huge timeline all around my studio, and I kept putting in like events that I found totally amazing and entertaining and enlightening. And that's how I wrote the book. So I would skip 20 years here and there because it wasn't interesting.
Now is it categorized as historical fiction or history? So it's historical fiction. What's the fictional part? Did you have to imagine to get into the characters? Like last week, I interviewed an author of historical fiction, and sometimes you have to basically imagine, but you had a lot of material there where like you actually have the artist's letters. So that gives you an insight into their characters. But how about somebody who 40 years down the line acquired the painting? How did you get into their character?
Lots and lots of research, but obviously historical fiction does require from the author to get into that mindset, to imagine what that person might have said. You have to speak on behalf of that person. But the added sort of challenge of what I had to write is along the timeline, even with people like, the expert on this painting, the painting, no one knew where its whereabouts were for several periods at a time. So I had to do tons of research to try to connect point A and point B, and that area in between where it was kind of lost, like where could it have been? How did it get from point A to point B? And that was the real challenge. And that's where the fictional part comes in, but it is still based on a lot of research.
Yeah. Now, where was the last person? Where did the museum acquire it from? Did somebody like find it in their sewing machine, or
no, nothing?
Was there ever anybody who they didn't realize what they had? What along your lines?
No.
Everybody always knew what they had.
They knew exactly what they had. But what's interesting is that for most of its life, it was hidden behind these sort of secret chambers, behind other paintings. So the last collector was actually one of the world's most famous psychoanalysts, which I find really interesting. His name was Jacques Lacan, French, and he acquired this painting, and he also had it hidden behind another painting. And eventually he had it for many, many years. And that was a story in itself. But eventually he died, and his widow, who loved the painting, she held on to it. And there were rumors that she had it, but she kept denying that she had it. But eventually the truth came out.
Why did she deny it? Just because it was so risque?
No, she didn't find it risque. She thought the world wasn't ready for it.
Oh, okay.
She was very protective of it. I feel I really understand her. And when she died, her family was faced with an enormous tax liability. So they had to negotiate with the government, and they had to give up Courbet's painting as part of their negotiations with this huge tax liability. And once the government got hold of it, then it got into the museum system, and the Orsay Museum eventually acquired it.
And this is the same government who, when the artist painted it, they basically exiled him?
Well, it wasn't the same. He was exiled, in the 1870s.
Yeah, but it's the same government, but it's just a different timeline.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Irony,
So this is a painting that has a long history in France. It's, Gustave Courbet is actually, believe it or not, a household name in France. He has his own street. Everybody knows about him because he was such a rebel, and he was also a revolutionary who stuck up for the common man. He was very outspoken in that way. He was, like I said, a real character, someone to be admired.
So your book that, it's won 6 awards.
Yeah.
6 book awards. And when was it originally released? When did you originally release it? Did you have trouble getting it published because it was risque? Did any of the publishers that you approached with this project, did they find it too risque? Or
that's a really good question too. When I finally finished it, and as an author, you've got this book and you go, oh, now what? And it's out into the world. So I started the traditional way, which was to try to get an agent. And that was a very difficult process because they kept saying that they loved the book, but they didn't like the fact that it was a fusion of various genres, which is
and that's
and that's like the kiss of death, right? Because they want to put it on a shelf. They want to say this is blah blah. But because my own memoir about my adventures, my personal adventures with the painting is in there, they kept saying, no, you have to rewrite it, and you have to. Well, I didn't want to rewrite it because I really felt strongly that starting off with my really entertaining adventures with this painting would draw in a contemporary reader more than just like diving into a history of a painting. It just made it come alive. So after many, many tries, I finally did get a New York agent, but she had the same problem with the publishers she tried to sell it to. Well, what is it? Where should we put it on the shelf, and all this? So it wasn't the fact that it was about an erotic painting. It was more a commercial decision of how to, where to put it on the shelf. So I just said, forget this. I'm going to self-publish. And I published with an excellent production company, Girl Friday Productions. So it looks beautiful. It's beautifully produced. And then it started winning all these prizes. And Girl Friday Productions started their own imprint, Girl Friday Books. And they asked me to be in their first catalog. And so they re-released it. So I released it in 2020 as a indie book. And then in October 2021, it was re-released by Go Friday Books.
So you basically helped your publisher by that.
Yeah.
But, your book has actually helped you. But, the whole thing, the whole category thing, and I've researched this. This is actually started by booksellers, not necessarily the publishers, because they want to know what shelf to put, the physical brick and mortar bookstores. They want to know what shelf to put the book on. Right. So that's why they start all these categories. But the thing is that now that so many books are online, and they can have, and a book isn't necessarily on a shelf, you can put all these different categories on there.
That's right. Like on Amazon or something, you've got like, about 5 different categories.
Basically, your one book is on 5 different shelves online. So, so that's basically, I think, going away. I think eventually it will go away, because my books are, and I write fiction, and it's mystery and suspense and police procedural and cozy. It's a blend of different things, but that was the category that, and the thing with publishing is that if you took a step outside of the category, like if you wrote a cozy mystery and you hurt the dog, then you're no longer in the cozy anymore.
Wow, it's that specific, is it?
Yeah,
wow.
That's that specific. They have these rules that you need to stick by, and so many authors are going out of that. They're stepping out of that, and they're blending these different genres.
Yes. I mean, I've read many books that blend different genres. In fact, I'm sort of drawn to those books because they're so interesting, especially if the author themselves makes an appearance. And then you just get this sense that they're very much into the book. They're not standing there third person objectively. So I really find that interesting. And obviously, for me, this particular approach this time in this book was the right way to go. That's how I feel about it now.
Yeah, because that's how the book, books can't necessarily be written in a box.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's the problem that the industry has. And here you stepped outside the box, you thought outside the box. You probably weren't even aware of where the box was when you wrote the book.
No, I didn't understand about boxes.
You didn't understand about the box. Okay, so tell us, is the painting that you copied, you did not tell us, is that hanging up in your home now?
So many people want to know that. And, I came back with the painting, and what happened after 6 weeks of painting and sort of communing with this painting is the lines blurred between the painting and myself. I began to identify wholly with this painting as if I was painting myself. And that experience was entirely liberating and empowering as a woman. It was very exciting experience, a really unique experience. And when I got home, again, I realized that if I put it on my wall, it would again have the sort of scandalous reaction to anyone who would walk in the house. I did not want that for the painting. I did not want that for my memories of my experience, a very special, intimate experience. And so I have it here, but it is not hanging up and it's not hidden behind another painting. But every so often, I'll look at it, and it has been exhibited once in New York as part of an installation that I did that included that particular copy. But it's in my home, but not on the wall.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, Lilianne, why don't you tell us where we can find your book? Where we can buy, where readers can, and your website, where they can learn more about your book and maybe subscribe to your newsletter or your mailing list?
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. I have an art blog called Art and Beyond that in which I write my approach to art, and when I see a fantastic exhibition, I share it with my followers, and then I bring in books as well. So it's sort of a combination. You can find me on Lilianne Milgrom, author.com. Okay. That's Lilianne Milgrom, author.com. Okay. And the book is available now everywhere books can be found. And on my website, you can have the links to Amazon or Bookshop or Powell or Barnes and Nobles, wherever you are comfortable getting your book. And I would really appreciate hearing from readers. That is the most exciting part about being an author, don't you think?
Yes. Yes, and we're going to put the links below in the description so people will be able to find it, so that they can find your website and your art website, and and you're going to be on tour with us starting February 1st. So people can read about you and read about our, on your blog tour. Well, Lilianne, thank you so much for coming. And I'm sorry I butchered your name and I butchered the title of your book. That's, everybody, it's not her book. It's my
if you enjoyed this interview, then be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to receive notifications for future author interviews.
And thank you so
Until
much
next
for joining
time,
us today, Lilianne.
Happy reading
so
from
much.
authors on
Everybody
iTours.
visits on tour and reads more about your award-winning book.